Hey guys, it's Darren and welcome back to the Touch MBA podcast, episode number 202. So what we do here at the Touch MBA podcast is speak with admissions directors and successful students at the world's top MBA programs. So you get a better feel for what they're about. So you get the best tips to apply to these programs to maximize your chances of getting in. And ultimately, so that you make the best MBA investment. And we offer free school selection help at touchmba.com. So go check that out. For this episode, I brought on Tilla Caveng, who is a full-time MBA student at the National University of Singapore MBA program. The NUS MBA is the top-ranked MBA program in Singapore. It's one of the top programs in the world. And in this conversation, I asked Tilla what she was doing before the NUS MBA, why she decided to apply to a Singaporean business school from her home country of Switzerland, and her job in Switzerland, and ultimately, what she has learned after being in the program for the past 6 months. We also talk extensively about her best application tips as well to the NUS MBA. So I hope you enjoy this episode, especially those of you considering getting your MBAs in Singapore who might not be from Singapore, and what that journey is all about. So let's get straight to my conversation with Tilla Caveng. It is my pleasure to have a current NUS MBA full-time student to join us on this podcast, but she's not just your typical full-time NUS MBA student. She actually won the NUS MBA Dean's Award as well. I'm just really excited to talk with Tilla Caveng, who is currently, as I mentioned, attending the full-time NUS MBA program. And Tilla, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast.
Hi, Darren. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm actually very excited because as I was preparing for my MBA applications, I actually listened to your podcast.
Oh my gosh. Music to my ears. No, I'm so glad. Like when we were setting this up and you told me that, I couldn't believe it. I'm just so happy. Yeah, you're a listener of the show. So you know what this show is all about. You've heard a few episodes, so we can get right into it. Tilla, could you first tell us a bit more about your pre-MBA career, what you were doing, and how you ended up applying for MBA programs and to MBA programs in Singapore?
Sure. And I will actually take you back quite a lot of time to 2006 when I was 15 and part of a Rotary Youth Exchange program to Australia. So I lived with Australian grape growers in the countryside for 1 year. And ever since that experience, which was really amazing, I always had this idea in the back of my head that one day I want to live abroad again. I was really amazed by the cultural experience and the country as well. So this was all the time when I was growing up, and then also back in Switzerland again. Just had this in my mind. And also since I was 15, I somehow decided I want to become a lawyer. So I actually went on to graduate with a bachelor.
Okay, how did you decide at 15 to become a lawyer? Let's start there, because who does that?
That's a very, very strange thing. I've tried to determine this with my mother at some point as well, and we can't really tell. There are no lawyers in our family. We didn't have a TV when I grew up, so I don't even know where this came from, but somehow it was there. And I went through with my law graduation, bachelor's and master's from the University of Zurich, and then trained also with Baker McKenzie in Switzerland and the Swiss Federal Prosecutor's Office. And I think I got lucky in the sense that some people have also ideas when they're teenagers about what they want to become. And for me, it somehow worked out. And I had a great experience. And following my training, I decided to join Kaiser Partner Wealth Advisors in Liechtenstein. That was around 2018, actually in a client advisory position. And about half a year in, I was then offered the opportunity to join the strategy team of the chief executive. And it was a leap in a way away from legal work, which I was more used to, but somehow the strategy aspects, they tempted me, and I got involved in more and more strategic projects through time, and then moved on to be chief of staff, which was my pre-MBA position. And the idea for the MBA, I would say, was in the back of my head since probably my late university years, because at the time I spoke to a lot of law graduates, and in Switzerland, people who work in law firms often take an LLM degree, so maybe after like 2-3 years of working after university. And for me, that always sounded great, except for the fact that I thought, okay, I already have like 2 law degrees. Why should I? Maybe I want to get for my third one. Maybe I should get something else.
Wait, could you explain what LLM is to our audience who might not be
Yeah,
familiar?
sorry, of course. This is a legal master's degree. And usually it is taken, like from a Swiss perspective, usually it is taken in another country, in an English-speaking country. So people might go to the UK, US. I actually have a friend who did his LLM at NUS as well. Yeah, all over the world.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, so for me, for some reasons, it seemed more appealing to get into the business topics, and then it somehow just aligned with my more strategic job a few years back. And yeah, that's when I took the decision during COVID. I started preparations for the application, the GMAT studies, and so on.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, the GMAT studies. Oh man, the bane. Never fun. Well, some people like it actually. Like
Not
I
me.
have some, yeah, not you, not me either, but some of my friends like they're like, oh, I actually really enjoy taking these tests. But anyhow, why did you end up looking at business schools in Asia and in Singapore as opposed to, top schools in Switzerland? There's many great business schools there, or even in Europe.
Yeah, so with this experience when I was 15 in Australia, I just somehow knew that I wanted to go further than Europe. I wanted a real, not that you cannot get a real
Right.
cultural experience in Europe, the opposite actually, but I was somehow just tempted and curious to go further away. And I always loved Asia. I traveled to different Asian countries before, never Singapore actually. But I really appreciated the culture, the warmth of the people, the food, the climate. So somehow I was drawn towards Asia, and Singapore in particular, to me, just is a melting pot of people and cultures. And in Switzerland, it's also well known as a gateway to Asia. And yeah, for these reasons, it was very attractive to me to look around in Singapore.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
NUS in particular was interesting because the school itself has an Asian focus. How is business done from Asia? We look at different business cultures within Asia. And yeah, of course, it's also a highly regarded educational institution, even across borders. And yeah, different aspects. I don't know if I can mention these as well, but of course, like the duration of the program for me was extremely attractive because it's around 1.5 years, and a lot of other MBA programs, they tend to be 1 year or 2 years.
Right.
And for me, because the cultural aspect was so important, I felt like, oh, 1 year is quite short. But then again, to not work for 2 years is it's a long time also financially. So somehow this was the sweet spot. And in the NUS MBA, there's a lot of flexibility with the full-time and part-time programs. In case you get a job in Singapore, you can switch to part-time studies, and just, yeah, many different attractive aspects.
Yeah. I mean, was it a bit scary for you at all to apply to, obviously a top business school in Asia, but somewhere you've never been before? And of course, it's a big investment of your time and money. And, usually I actually advise people on the show, you probably heard me say this, that, you should really target schools that are strong in the geography you want to work in. right? And NUS clearly has that network in Singapore and Southeast Asia and beyond. But, as someone from Switzerland getting their MBA, like, was that a concern with your career goals?
It was a concern mainly in the sense that, so during the time I applied, uh, the world was still in the midst of the COVID crisis, and there were still quite strict measures in Switzerland as well as in Singapore and many other countries. So I didn't really know what will the everyday life look like, what will the job world look like. But because in a sense there was an uncertainty all over the world, and maybe that made at least the professional part a bit less scary, because yeah, in all countries you couldn't kind of guess in advance how things
Sure.
would develop.
Yeah.
But yeah, not an easy decision, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, so if you don't mind me asking, like, what were your sort of career goals that you had in mind and that, you applied to NUS MBA with?
I didn't actually have a specific career goal in the sense that I want to like switch industries or switch countries or switch my position. I was very open in that sense. Of course, it all like sounds very exciting and interesting, but for me, the main reason for the MBA was to open myself, to be confronted with my biases as well, to learn how to deal with people from different business cultures. And my previous position, we work with a lot of international clients. So I just had more general interests, I would say. And I was very open to working like geographically anywhere in the world after my MBA. I didn't have this specific goal, but of course, like there's a personal interest in Asia and in discovery here.
Yeah. Got it. No, it's actually kind of refreshing to hear because I don't hear that very often on the show. Let's talk a little bit about this. So you're applying to the NUS MBA, and I have to mine your best application tips. It's coming. So let's start with school selection, and then we'll get into the details, right, with your application. So what do you think helps you finally decide on NUS as one of the schools you applied to? I mean, if you don't mind sharing maybe some of the other schools you applied to, if any, as well.
Yeah, sure. So maybe on the selection topics first, I to find out where I would prefer to go, I did a lot of research, all different kinds of research. So obviously there's online research that's like the easiest that is available, but I spoke to a lot of people in my network back home. I spoke to people I knew who did MBAs in different countries all over the world. And then I started the way I work is very analytical. So I had this huge Excel list where I was comparing all the schools in different categories. And for me, one of the most important or interesting categories was always the constitution of the cohort. So how diverse is it? How many women are there? How many countries are people from? And which countries are people from? What is the average age, work experience? This for me was probably one of the most important factors because I was looking for this cultural diversity. But NUS ended up actually being my first choice. So I'm very excited that I actually got the spot here. And after time, so when I started to narrow down schools, I had backup plans. So in case this wouldn't work out, I was applying quite in an early round. So I had this backup plan. Okay, if this doesn't work, then I will send out a few more to other schools. But as I was narrowing down, I started to approach alums and current students of the schools I was interested in through online channels as well. LinkedIn mainly. Some of the schools, like NUS, for example, has this feature where you can get in touch with current students and you can just ask them questions about their life, their experience in the MBA. That was super helpful.
Yeah. Like, wow. So are you going to tell us a bit more about this Excel list that you made with all the schools? And like, did you rank weight, percent international and percent women? And like, size of cohort. We actually do that at Touch MBA. I mean, not those
Wow.
specific things, but with criteria, right? Because
Mm.
it's so funny, Tilla, because I've been in this industry for a long time. And even 15 years ago, applicants were creating Excel sheets to compare schools. So I just feel like the best solution is someone should just make a giant Excel sheet that people can just pick like the three things they care about, and that just plops out like, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Why
Anyways,
not?
why not?
It
Why
would
not?
it would save a lot of people a lot of work probably.
Right? Yeah.
I didn't go as far as to like insert a grading system. This I didn't do. Well,
Yes.
maybe one thing to add is I started to get in touch with the schools, and I started to have calls with the admissions offices to get a feeling for the people, to get a feeling also what they're looking for, and especially what is important in their specific applications. And I would say this was super helpful to me to understand them better, because yeah, like you recommend, it's ideal if you can find a school that fits who you are, it matches your values, and
Absolutely.
that's what I was trying to do in those calls.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that. And that's why this whole thing is called Touch MBA, because I truly believe the best way to assess fit is through talking to members of that tribe. So the last step of your process was approaching alumni through online channels, the admissions officers, if they were willing to talk to you. Like, I mean, did you have any very useful questions, or I don't know, ways of going about those conversations that really helped you glean these sort of qualities in the program that helped you identify it as a best fit program?
At the time, I would say I had more general questions because I actually had a huge learning in hindsight, which I will gladly share here. So I asked more general questions about the type of people they are looking for, and so on. And actually, one thing that kind of caught me by surprise when I arrived here is classes are 3 hours long. And now in my school and university times, they were just 1.5 hours. So I was a bit shocked in the first instance. And it was really funny because at the time I was applying, I wasn't asking these type of questions, because in my mind, I was just so used to the system. I couldn't even think like that things could be different. So definitely confronted with one of my biases, which was the purpose of me going on an exchange, or not
Yes.
exchange, but an MBA in a different country. So yeah, definitely, even though it was funny at the beginning, I ended up getting used to, and yeah, definitely a great learning, a great learning.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no. Yeah, so one thing I would recommend is to try to think more that way, like ask questions more about everyday life, to discover these kind of things, which I didn't at the time. And I think it wouldn't have changed my mind about NUS, but yeah, maybe the the surprise wouldn't have been there so much upon arrival. Yeah.
I mean, did you structure the conversations kind of like, okay, this is my background, this is what I'm trying to do. Do you think this is a good fit for me? Or is it more almost like a curiosity, like, oh, you're doing this and this at NUS, and this was your background, and you're looking to do this and this. Like, can you tell me more about your experience? I mean, I'm just curious how you went about it.
I remember that the admissions officers, they were usually quite interested in my background, because it's a bit unusual, let's say, to come as a lawyer, as a female lawyer. I would say it's not absolutely strange. We also have some other female lawyers in our current class, but we're definitely not the majority profile, let's say. So there was quickly an interest by the admissions office. And I think so my recommendation would be here, like for each applicant to kind of point out where you are different from the masses. And I think everyone has something in that regard. So you just have to find out for yourself what is it, so you can highlight it and then spark the interest for a conversation. And my questions were more about like the focus of the programs,
I see.
the professors, like potential guest speakers, the profile of the class, things like that.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, that's clear. So let's talk about the application itself. So you've settled on in US and now you've taken the GMAT, I assume.
Yes, I have.
So for the essays, right? I'm curious to hear, because I know sometimes the questions change year to year, but generally NUS tends to ask about kind of what have you done and how do you plan to transform during the program? I think that's one of their core questions. So yeah, how did you approach that?
I think once again there it's important to highlight how you're different, and I think you should be yourself. It needs to be credible what you write, and the best way to be credible is to be yourself. And just for the process in general, for the application, I surrounded myself with people who were supportive of what I was heading for. And in that sense, I am lucky because my family, my friends, my workplace, they were supportive from the beginning. But let's say if they hadn't been, I would have tried to go out and like find people that are supportive, because it would just make the process easier. So actually some people, they then read my essays and gave me feedback on like their impression of, does it actually reflect me or not?
Great question. Yeah.
Yes, and also I actually had a mentor for the application process. So someone who was allocated to me through a professional women's network
Wow.
in Zurich. And yeah, it was really nice for me to have her in the background and sometimes pushing me like, oh, did you study? Like, are you writing your essays? And so on. Yeah, so that was a great help in this this whole proceeding. And one of the essays actually is about the scholarship options at NUS you can apply for. So I think this is done very neatly by NUS Business School, that it's just part of each application that you apply to the scholarships. And I think for some other business schools, you tend to have to send an application for each specific scholarship separately. And NUS has almost a catalog of different scholarship options, but you just submit one application and they will consider it centrally and then decide, okay, where would you maybe be a good candidate?
Yeah, I mean, so how did you sort of pitch yourself for the scholarship, which you won, which is really quite an achievement, the
Thank you.
Dean's
Thank you so
Award.
much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, so I originally hadn't pitched myself for this specific scholarship.
Yeah.
I generally pitched for an excellence achiever scholarship, or a female scholarship, or then diversity scholarship, being aware that because of my background and a profile that is not very common, I could be considered for those. And my main pitch was how I could bring a different perspective to the MBA class. With my background comes a certain type of like thinking, like with any other background, and just like showing how I could mix up discussions. Also, my international experience living abroad before, working for large firms, but also small firms and the government. So just like highlighting all those diverse aspects in my character, and even like personally. So one of my hobbies is baking. So I even highlighted that just to, give some more personal aspects as well.
That's great. I mean, can I ask, like, was it more like with your essays that you kind of laid forth this argument, right? Like both for the scholarship and for the essays, in terms of like, okay, this is what I've done, this is what I want to do, this is how I can contribute, right, to the NUS class and my classmates? Or did you tell more stories? Because I think both can work, but I'm just wondering what your approach was.
Yes, that's true. And I think I remember we had about 4 or 5 different essays. and my approach was different for the different essays. There is a word limit to the different essays, and some are quite short. So in those, you want to like be very clear on your pitch and very direct. And others leave a bit more room so you can actually do some storytelling. And I also did that for my personal motivation essay, yes.
Yes. Okay. So you did a mix. Yeah. I mean, the word limits are, I think it was 250 words for the first essay, 350 for the longer one, and then an optional essay, and then the scholarship essay. Optional essay is 200 words. So let's talk about your interview. Who did you interview with, and what was that experience like, and what can you share with our audience about the NUS MBA interview itself, and any tips you have there?
Sure. I was actually interviewed by someone from the admissions office and one of the alums.
At the same time, or two separate?
At the same time.
At the same time,
yes.
Yeah.
And of course, it was an online interview. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience in the sense that the type of work interviews I was used to from Switzerland is it's very conversational. You start somewhere with a question, then you try to build rapport and follow up on some topics. And the interview style here was a bit different. So I was just given one question after the next. And for me, first instance after the interview, I thought, oh no, this really didn't work well. I couldn't build any rapport. Disaster. But then I realized I had it went well, of course, and then I had the scholarship interview, which was in a similar way, and I actually realized so the purpose of the interview was maybe different. So it was challenging me, right? So how quickly can she react to questions, like different styles of questions, and yeah, I managed to do that, but it was in a sense. Yeah, it was a good experience, like the first probably cultural aspect to start with. And yeah, really, really nice, really nice. Also to have an alum in the interview, not just the office, because the questions they asked were quite different. So
what types of questions did they ask? That's what everyone wants to know. You don't have to, you don't have to tell us the questions, but what
I'm
types
not
of
sure
questions?
how much I'm allowed to say. So of course there is like the general questions you want to like bring through your application. Like, why do you want to do an MBA? Like, why do you want to do it in Singapore? Why would you want to do it at NUS? I think every applicant has to be clear in this regard wherever they apply. And then from the alum, I kept receiving also some more like practical questions about my background, about my application. Yeah, I think just figuring out like who I am, how I work, how I interact with people. So a bit of the different, maybe like one academic perspective and one more practical perspective. And for my interview preparation, because I knew I have to be really strong in bringing across why I want to come to NUS in Singapore. So I prepared a lot through informing myself just about Singapore in general. So I even read up about like history, culture, the school, people who attended the school. Yeah, what alums say. And then I listened to your podcast episodes with Safira Jati and Nanza from the MBA office. Yeah, just to get a really good picture.
So they didn't ask you like case study questions. It wasn't like a consulting interview.
I've never been in a consulting interview so far, but no, I didn't receive case study questions.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, any just general tips there to, you know, now that you went through that, like if you were to do that again, would you prepare differently?
I think for me, prepare differently, no. I was very happy. Like I felt on the content, I was super strong. Maybe like a general comment. For me, it was very natural that for this video interview, I would dress in a suit. I will make sure the lighting is good, the camera angle, and so on. And this seemed natural to me. I think it's maybe not natural for everyone, because in a sense we're applying to a school and not a job and so on. But I think just to have this professional appearance, so from the first, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I think it's this kind of principle that you don't want there to be any thoughts by the interviewer when they enter the call and they're like, oh, what's in the background there in the room, or just no distractions, maybe. Yeah.
I think that is such a great tip. I mean, it might sound like, no, of course, like this is so obvious, but it's actually takes a lot of thinking and preparation. I mean, one reason I don't like to show my face on the Touch MBA podcast, because I don't want people to see, like, obviously my face, but also what's in the background and what's going on behind me. And if you think about videos you watch on YouTube, even your favorite influencers on whatever social media you use, like, think about what you notice first when you see them. It's usually the background. At least for me, like you're like, oh, she's here or he's here. Like, what does that mean? So I think that's such a good tip to keep that in mind. And we're not saying you need a full studio, like streaming studio or anything, but yeah, be professional, have things arranged in the background, good lighting, very important to make a first impression, for sure. Yeah,
and I
that's no joke.
I just remembered something maybe to add on
Please.
the application tips. Just from my personal experience, I would say it's okay if you have a weakness in your application, but I think the way you handle it is important. So for me, my weakness was my quant score in the GMAT, and the way I handled that is I actually did online courses at another university and took some quant related courses to like show to the school that actually, okay, maybe the GMAT was not perfect in that regard, but I'm definitely able and willing to put in the work, and I can handle the quant topics as well. So I think it's it's a marketing question, and it's like the MBA starting before the program starts. So the application is not pre-MBA. This is actually part of the MBA.
Yeah. I mean, would you mind me asking, like, what percentile you were on the quant?
Or to be honest, I wouldn't even remember by heart, but I can just tell you that it probably wasn't the best.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think I would normally advise people, right? If they were close to the average, then you should feel more comfortable with your quant score. But if it's like significantly below the average GMAT, then you should do what you did and really show the self-awareness that this is could be seen as a potential weakness, and then B, taking massive action to give AdCom signals of confidence in that weak area, or that you're willing to put in the work, right? Which you clearly did. Yeah. I think it's so hard for applicants because obviously you're getting a graduate degree because you want to improve yourself, you want to improve your skills, you want to improve upon your weaknesses and your strengths. And so we know this as admissions people. So I think it's like you said, it's more about how you tell the story and what's your plan, right? Because if you had a weak GMAT, but you're like, nope, that's it. that's tough.
Good.
That's tough for us, right?
Yeah.
That's not good, because that would be a signal that maybe this person isn't willing to put in the work during the program. I mean, it's just modeling future behavior on past behavior, right? So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox there, but I mean, do you have any other application tips to share with the audience before we move on?
No, I would actually say these are the main points.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So let's now transition and talk about your first 6 months in Singapore and what this transition has been like. Let's start with the actual program itself, and then I want to move into the more cultural side, like living in Singapore and being in Singapore. So with the NUS MBA, what has been the most surprising part of the program? And if you don't mind sharing, maybe, what have you struggled with? What should more people know about that's not available on the website?
Sure. So the surprising most surprising part of the program. And I'm probably already getting into the cultural part a little bit. I
Oh,
know you
let's
want
go
to
there.
address
We
that
can
later,
mix
but
them. We can mix them. Yeah.
for me, yeah, it's really in that area. So to me, being in the program is like traveling every day. So I remember when I told people back home I'm going to Singapore, they were saying, "Oh, great, you can like from Singapore, you're so close to Indonesia and the Philippines and everywhere else. And oh, great, you can travel on the weekends." But being in the program, the people I meet here every day, my co-MBAs, my professors, the program's office, they are from a lot of different countries, and just getting to know them, interacting with them is like traveling the world. And it's a really amazing experience and a very warm experience. So my welcome in the program was great. And the way the program is kicked off is by a boot camp that is called Launch Your Transformation, where you are grouped with people that are deliberately from different countries than you, and you are thrown into exercises that challenge you. So you have to get up in front of a big group of people, speak about personal topics and about your professional career. And yeah, you learn a lot of things, and it can be a bit daunting at the beginning, but it was such a great opener to the program, because you start to feel really close to those people from the beginning. So you can really start your transformation.
Yeah. I mean, did you really find it like that sort of? I love what you said, being part of the program is like traveling every day. Does it feel more Asia focused,
Um,
or
like in
right?
the sense more Asia focused than
Like you're traveling around Asia as opposed to
okay.
traveling around the world.
Yes, definitely, definitely, because there are a lot of people from different Asian countries, also countries outside Asia. But the biggest national groups in our cohort, they're from India, China, and Japan, Korea,
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
then from, I think, almost probably like at least 10, more than 10 Asian countries. And so what happens then at the end of class, right, is that you're invited to dinners. Okay, they're maybe Vietnamese MBA students, and they will tell you, okay, we're going to this Vietnamese place. Come with us. So it's really amazing, and because you have this authentic culture. Their authentic culture is here in Singapore as well, because Singapore is so international, and especially with regards to different Asian countries. So yes, it definitely feels very Asian.
Mm, yeah. I mean, anything else like that has really stood out for you with the program?
Definitely the warmth that I receive. Just when I arrived, okay, I came to this new country, didn't know anyone, and the first day I came to school, okay, orientation. I was one of the first people in the building, and someone just greeted me with a really big hug, like, "Oh, welcome to Singapore." And this kind of carries throughout the program, and you realize I speak more about the soft aspects, but I think this is quite my my character. And I can really feel it like all the way. So even like the professors we interact with, I can really like feel their human side as well. And I also get their culture. So we have professors from different Asian countries, also outside Asia, but it just comes through. And there was an instance where I fell ill in October, and yeah, it went bad very quickly, and I had to go to the hospital. And somehow word spread like a wildfire, and I was lying there, and suddenly my phone started to go bing, 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 and all these messages started to come in, like, "Oh, can we pick you up? Do you need food?" So everyone is really caring, and I think this is the environment that I need to be able to take in all the like the academic and the practical things that I learn at school. For this, I just need to have this background and the community that the school creates. So that's really outstanding to me. And I didn't know what to expect in this regard, because I knew, okay, there will probably not be a lot of Swiss people. So yeah, it was a surprise in that sense. And academically, not maybe not surprising, because I was hoping and expecting this like specific Asian input, but I want to highlight my favorite subject, which I'm taking at the moment, and this is called the Asian Business Environments with Professor Pasha Mahmoud, where we actually look at global business from an Asian perspective. And we learn a lot about how things are connected. It even goes into history and even to a certain degree, philosophy, because if you could just tell the future in advance, I think we didn't have to go to school. And we look into business cultures of specific different countries in Asia to learn more. And we have this exchange in the multicultural class. And for me, this is so far the absolute highlight of my MBA.
Has it been difficult for you to adjust to the curriculum as, a trained lawyer? Like, has that been difficult for you? Like the quantitative courses, the core courses?
Yes, definitely. Definitely a challenge. To me, it always matters why I'm doing something. So I will say, like, taking the courses in class for me was easier than just sitting at home. And when I was preparing for the GMAT, the quant part, I know like I'm doing the GMAT to apply for the MBA, right? So it's important. But like the math itself, like I'm to my lawyer brain, I'm like, okay, I'm doing some like calculations. Okay, what am I doing? And in class, actually, for example, the economics class or the accountings class, there is more of a like practical relation. So I can better place it in my head, like, oh, why in like a specific business everyday life am I doing this? And this actually helped me. And the professors are always open to questions. Yeah, but it was not an easy part for me.
Yeah. Right. I mean, because I think a lot of students, they might come from a business background, so they might have seen a lot of this stuff before. Right. I mean, academic business background is what I mean. But let's talk a little bit about the clubs and the student life, because I know you were formerly a Girl Scout leader and local president and national board member of the European Law Students Association in Switzerland, all these things. You're a baker. You like to organize events around your baking. What is the student club system like there? How involved are you? I mean, I know there's this like exco committee and student leaders of each of the clubs, but yeah, can you kind of paint a picture for us of what that's like?
So the student club system is super active. There are around 10, I think even 12 different student clubs, and some are focused on professional topics like, let's say, consulting or healthcare, and others are focused on more what I would call like soft skill topics, like the Sandbox Club, which is about speaking. Then there's the Sports and Wellness Club, the Social and Community and Culture Club. So there are a lot of different clubs. And of course, from the very beginning, because I like these kind of organizing and board activities, I was quite interested, but then actually decided not to run for a club presidency position, because the MBA for me is kind of a discovery experience. So I thought, okay, if I will be like on the board of a specific club, I will be quite involved in all of those activities, and it might take so much time that I have potentially less time to discover what all the other clubs are doing. So I decided to not take on a board position, but even if you're not on the board of a specific club, you can get involved in planning activities. You can bring ideas. You can even take the lead, of course, like coordinating with the club leaders. And they really appreciate it, of course, because more people means more ideas. And just for my activities, so I got to attend a lot of quite interesting events that are very education rich, educative. I'm not sure
Yeah.
about the word, but for example, the Finance Club recently organized a trading competition through an online platform, which was very engaging. And there are a lot of talks. The entrepreneurship club usually invites different entrepreneurs for specific topics like Asia related, or then there's the sustainability club. They have their panels that they organize. So there's just so much happening. And I think for NUS and Singapore in general, probably every night I could go to from like 1 to 3 super interesting events. And the hardest thing is actually to decide where to go. And yeah, there's always a bit of fear of missing out going on, because if you go one place, you can't be in the other. And yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing of being in a place like Singapore. It's very active.
How are you doing with your FOMO? Are you like, how are you deciding on what to attend or what not to attend?
I try to so first is I focus on my body, because there is so much happening. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. So I just check in with myself, like, do I actually feel okay, like, to go somewhere tonight and to be surrounded by a lot of people? And very often I do, so that's a good thing. I like to discover new things. I'm very curious. So if I go, I tend to go to places where I maybe don't know so many people yet. Networking is something that is really easily done in Singapore, because people are very interested. Also outside the MBA, it's very easy to approach people. Yeah, something I really, really appreciate about Singapore. So I will focus on, it's a lot of stomach decisions of where I feel like going, or then like sometimes very clearly, okay, there's a specific topic that interests me. I would like to know more about. I think for me, this is the nice aspect, because I don't have a very preset idea of what my post MBA position should be. So I feel very free to just go out and discover.
Okay, so I think a huge theme of this conversation so far has been your curiosity and how it has really driven you to apply to NUS, to fly across the world, to be in Singapore. So how are you channeling that? Like, how are you using this precious 18 months you have off of work to explore, right? Like, not just academically and career-wise, but personally. So yeah, I'll just leave it there, and I'm curious to hear, yeah, what you're doing and your thoughts.
I would, yeah, to challenge myself is really important for me. So speaking to as many people as possible from different countries is for me a really important aspect of this MBA, and this is what we get through school. So to give you an example, okay, there are people back home in Switzerland that I know that have a Chinese background, but very few of them have lived all of their lives in China. So for me, it's super interesting to meet those people that really have a completely different background than me, and just to hear about their lives, their personal lives, their careers, like how they think about the world, how do they see things. Then for me, somehow food is really a big part of culture and language as well. So as soon as I got admitted by NUS, I started to take Mandarin classes, being aware like how complex the language is, and that probably it wouldn't be possible for me to reach a very high level. But I think through language you can learn a lot of things about how people interact and what is important. And for me, what came through learning a lot of Mandarin is the importance of symbolism in Chinese culture, for example, and just this, what maybe to some people can seem like a small thing, to me is huge, because I learned so much. And yeah, so it's interesting to hear, or just sometimes people say, oh, in our culture we have a word for, and then they describe a very specific situation. And it's surprising because in my culture we don't have this word because this situation is maybe not a very common thing. And yeah, it's just incredibly enriching. And this is all like under this umbrella of the NUS school, where we also get the business background at the same time. And I think it shouldn't be underestimated, all these cultural aspects for the business life later on, even if it will not be the direct content of conversation with business partners. I think it's helpful to know.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, you almost sound like an anthropologist. And okay, so sorry, this is my one kind of like interview question. But for example, like, how would you say, having had those conversations and having seen these different perspectives, how has your worldview changed? Like in terms of how you interact with, let's say, people from Asia, like to make it a little more specific. I'm wondering like how that has changed you.
Mm-hmm. I've become much more humble. I would say humility was always important for me, but just to understand about some of the luck I had, just for example, to have my family who always fully supported me in like going abroad on my own. This is not something that can be easily expected in some other cultures, where people, for example, they stay with their families until they get married. So I'm starting to understand more about myself as well through other people. And yeah, I'm very grateful for all the things that I have. And yeah, I learn a lot from other people, like how they handle situations in their lives. And yeah, the way of thinking definitely changes.
Has your opinion of Singapore changed since you've been living there?
My opinion of Singapore, that's an interesting question.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I think I would say it is much more, how to put this, much more lively. It's probably wrong because I knew it's like an eclectic place and it's very multicultural, but then it's just different to experience yourself once you're there. And yeah, I can just recommend it to anyone to come here.
Like, what are some of the fun things you do, outside of the MBA program, like in Singapore, in your new location?
One thing I really like is to discover different areas of Singapore. So it seems sometimes when you speak to expats here, they say, "Oh, Singapore is so small," and then like very quickly you have to leave on the weekends and you need to discover other places. And I share part of that feeling in the sense that it can be quite busy and intense. So in that way, I might feel, okay, on the weekend, I need a break. But I wouldn't say Singapore is too small. There are so many like small streets you can walk through and you will discover so many things. There are different quarters like Chinatown, Little India, Arab Street, and even outside the center, there is the natural parks, there is the north, there's even small islands off the coast. So there is so much to discover. So I would never say that Singapore is too small to stay for a long time.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I mean, I think I really hope this conversation gives people kind of like a more inside perspective on what's going on and at least through your eyes, like how you've grown and what you see as interesting. I mean, just any last sort of tips or advice or insights you've had about this journey of yours? I mean, it's been what, 6-7 months now, right?
Yes, yes. So maybe one topic I think we haven't touched is internship and job applications
Yes.
for students
Yes. How
here.
could I forget that one? Crucial.
So
Yes. Okay, let's go. Let's go deep here.
very good, very good. So from my perspective, I myself haven't applied to internships here also because to me it is a discovery journey. So I feel I want to first learn more before I start to go and apply. But actually, a lot of my peers, they have applied to internships and gotten internships, and some even managed to land full-time jobs during the MBA program. And I think this is where the NUS MBA flexibility comes in. So people have actually switched from a full-time program to the part-time program after getting full-time positions
So
here in Singapore.
within 5-6 months, right? Within the first semester.
Yes. And very interestingly, like people got internships in a lot of different industries. So there are some of us now working for VCs in consulting, insurance, energy providers. Quite a few of my peers got internships at Grab. So there's a variety of options out there. And of course, there's still this like post-COVID situation, and I feel that Singapore like still puts an emphasis on supporting locals, but it really is possible for MBA students to land internships and jobs, and especially also through the network of the NUS MBA. So we had a lot of instances where senior students or alums or part-time students, they know about opportunities in their companies and they share with the current batch of MBA students. That's one channel. And then, of course, there are the career services of the NUS MBA. There's a platform where companies put MBA internships specifically. So there are a lot of sources. And of course, it's competitive, but I would say like all good jobs are competitive. So I think good news in that aspect for Singapore and NUS.
How do those alumni share those job openings with the current students? Is it through the clubs? Is it like what's the mechanism for that?
Actually, different channels. So what I can tell, because I know, is that sometimes people from our batch who are in touch with the alums or the seniors or part-timers, they will send a text message to the WhatsApp chat that we have for the whole cohort. So this might be just a more like informal way of like sharing the link to like the online posting, be like, by the way, have you seen? And this is the company, and there's an alum working for that company. But I'm assuming there are also other channels like where alums are in contact with the career services, but that's something I'm not involved in, so I wouldn't be able to say. But there's a lot of openings being posted on the platform, so I'm sure there are some channels.
So it's almost like crowdsourced. It's like within the class, because there's how many people are in your class? It's like
we are around 110 full-time MBAs and around 120 part-time MBAs.
So all 110 of you are in that WhatsApp chat?
All 230, 40 are in that WhatsApp chat.
So they don't even separate like full-time plus part-time. It's just the whole class together. Interesting.
Yes, and actually that's very deliberate to mix the full-timers with the part-timers. And this is a really, really great aspect of this program, because through the part-timers, we can learn a lot about how it is to work in Singapore, how it is to live in Singapore. And some of them are expats as well. So you get local perspectives, international perspectives, some people who have grown up here, people who have been here for 7 years, 3 years. And that's actually a really great aspect. And we are mixed with part-time students from the beginning of the program. So even in the first semester, there is for every student at least one class that they share with part-time students. So every week we get to interact, and it's also very inspiring to see them handle the workload, because sometimes we might be like complaining a little bit about our workload.
No joke.
But then you have the people that have full-time jobs, like some of them kids at home, families, plus their part-time studies. So it's incredibly inspiring to meet them and to work with them as well.
And in terms of like the logistics of visas and all that, like the NUS MBA program helps you guys with that? Or how does that work?
To be honest, I don't know about the details of this because I'm very lucky as a Swiss person. For me, it was relatively easy to come to Singapore. So for the general, of course, for the student visa, there is full support.
Yeah.
So we get instructions in advance, like what conditions you need to fulfill. There are some health checks you need to do before coming to Singapore. So in that aspect, we have full support with regards to work permit. So on the student visa, you're allowed to work up to 16 hours per week in Singapore. But of course, as a lawyer, please check online what applies to you. And then for the work visas, I'm not sure about the details, but usually it's actually the companies who have to support the applicant in getting a visa. So in case someone switches to the full-time work, this is or these are some technicalities I'm not very familiar with, but for the general student visa, full support, yes.
Can I ask, how are you personally kind of putting your feelers out to assess different career opportunities for yourself? Like, yeah.
I talk to as many people as possible, and I try to tap also circles outside the MBA. For example, the Swiss community in Switzerland, in Singapore,
Right.
obviously, is quite strong. There is a Swiss Singaporean Chamber of Commerce that is very well established. So for me, this has been very helpful to also join the chamber as a young working professional. And it's a little bit different for different people depending on where they come from, but there are also a lot of other commerce chambers, of course, in Singapore. There are programs, like there could be service clubs that one can join, cultural events. So yeah, I try to tap different channels and maybe even simple things. Like I go to yoga classes once a week, and I just make an effort to. I really like people, so I just speak to lots of people, and then yeah, sometimes you find just those people that are just super interesting with backgrounds you're interested in, and then when you know, obviously you can start to ask more questions. And of course, the NUS MBA career services, they actually organize all kinds of different events that are really helpful. So one type of event they have is sometimes there are like workshops additional to mandatory classes. So you can choose to attend those. And they focus on specific topics. For example, one I really appreciated was on how to present yourself online. In Singapore, LinkedIn is very important in the business world. So it was really amazing to attend that workshop. But then every event you go to is an opportunity to speak to people. So for example, the lecturer we had in that workshop, Eric Sim, he's then someone you can speak to in the break or after the event, and you can try to establish connections. So there are different types of workshops for different topics. And then career services have what we call the happy hour. So once a week, they meet in the atrium of our business building, and they have one special guest from different industries, different backgrounds. And you can just casually like go there and speak to career services, speak to special guests, speak to your cohort. And then there are the more specified career sessions where each of us has a personal career advisor from the MBA office, where we can have bilateral meetings and discuss our goals. And they have networks and information that can help us. And finally, there are even some special events. So for example, last semester, we had these specific networking events where the services invited people from different industries. And we could attend and just speak to all of them, get to know them, learn about what they do. So it helps if you're outgoing, let's say.
Absolutely. Okay, one last question for you, Tilla, is can you tell me about a close friend you've made through the NUS MBA and what they're planning to do with the program in Singapore?
Yes, one of my close friends actually is from India, from an engineering background. And he came to NUS MBA to actually go into consulting. And he actually already managed, he's working on a volunteering consulting project. And at the same time, he managed actually to bring his wife to Singapore, who also found a job here. So to really establish himself in this new country and go out into the world post MBA.
And how did you guys meet?
Actually, we met during the first week of the MBA in the Launch Your Transformation bootcamp, where we were paired in the same team. Yeah, since then, very good friends. We did a lot of team projects together. So sometimes at NUS, you can pick your team partners and sometimes you're paired up.
Yes.
So in the picking situations, naturally, you know already who you work well with. So you try to form groups, but then also, I appreciate sometimes we are thrown into cold water.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Tilla, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and I wish you the best with the rest of your year. And please stay in touch. I would like to know what you end up doing and how this whole MBA program will affect your life. Maybe we can even do a follow-up podcast at some point. But
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Darren.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Remember, you can get free school selection help and a profile review at touchmba.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Just search for Touch